Welcome. My name is Rich Davis, and I have the pleasure to be chair of the board of the Legal Aid Society. And we're all very pleased and happy to be out in Queens to celebrate 50 years of providing service to this great borough. And I say great borough, and some of you from the Queens office know that I am a Queens boy. Grew up in Queens, and I used to every night, almost every night, come to this building where my father was a freelance real estate title examiner, and he would finish his day checking the street maps in this building, and we would pick them up to take them home. So I have a special feeling for this borough as the place where I grew up. And it is an important part of the legal aid family. And you know, today I can't let an occasion go by without reminding everybody how important it is what legal aid is doing. We always have a terrifically important mission in terms of protecting the rights of our most vulnerable citizens. But in light of what's going on in Washington, that obligation is even greater. The need for us to be persistent is even greater. And we are prepared and continue to fight every day to make sure that those who need our assistance get what they need to try and protect their rights, you know, whether it be immigrants, whether it be undocumented, whether it be people who are denying benefits, who have health care issues, whether it be the indigent in the criminal system, whether it be those vulnerable children who our juvenile rights practice represents. We're there for them, and we're there from throughout the city, and tonight we're celebrating the fact that we're there for them in this borough. I'd like to introduce some of our leadership here in Queens. We have Satish Nori, who runs our civil practice. Tim Roundtree, who runs our criminal practice. Carolyn Silvers, who runs our juvenile practice. And I'd just like all the Queens staff members to just stand up for a moment. If you're a Queens staff member, stand up so we can say thank you to all of you. It's also my privilege to introduce Borough President Melinda Katz. She has it says on this sheet that I should call her President Katz, but somehow, Melinda, is that okay? Is it okay? Since I knew Melinda when she got her start as a lawyer at a very small firm called Weil, Gottrell, and Manges, where we both worked at the time. But she's gone on to much bigger and better things since. She's been a dedicated public servant for over 20 years. She actually, before that, interned at the Legal Aid Society at the Tenants' Rights Project while she was going to law school. As a member of the City Council, she fought and successfully obtained 15,000 units of affordable housing. In the State Assembly, she was a fighter for many things, including important health care for women. So she's been a true friend of those in need and a true friend of the Legal Aid Society. So I'm pleased to present President Katz.
Good morning. Good morning. Good evening. After the day I've had and the week I've had, it feels like, get turned around. We want to welcome everyone to the Helen Marshall Cultural Center right here in the Borough of Queens, the People's House as we call it. It is the City Hall of Queens, and we are very excited that you're here with us tonight. I want to thank Richard Davis for the work he's done. We did know each other at Weil Gottrell. That's where I started many years ago, a few decades ago. I thank him for the service he has given to the city of New York I want to also thank Seymour James, the Attorney-in-Chief, of course, of the Legal Aid Society, and Tim, who runs the criminal division here in Queens, and Satish, and Carolyn, and all of the leadership for the great borough, and Blaine, I guess Finn Fogg, the president of the Legal Aid Society, and all the judges that have joined us. I have to tell you, it's a great tribute to the society that so many judges have joined us this evening, and we always thank them for being part of what we do. It shows the great relationship between both the Legal Aid Society and the judicial branch, and so thank you. I did have the honor of interning for the Legal Aid Society Civil Division. At the time, it was on Park Row for Brooklyn. It was in Park Row for Manhattan in Brooklyn, for Brooklyn. And I worked for a woman named Susan Bond at the time, and I had a great, Susan Bond, yay! I had a great experience with legal aid, and I enjoyed the practice. And you know what it's like, right? I walked in as an intern in law school, and they were like, "Here's a few cases, go get them." And I was like, I didn't know what to do, but it was great training at the time. But we value the relationship that we have with you. In fact, I just got off the phone with our great Commissioner of Homeless Services, Steve Banks. Before I came down here, he sends his love. He told me to send my love. He didn't say love, just so you know. He said, say hello for me. But he, when I was in the city council, he was a great advocate for legal aid. And he would come up, and every time he was standing on the steps of City Hall during budget season, I knew I was toast, unless we did something for legal aid. And so it is a great tribute that you have so many people that have been part of the group who stay loyal and who stay understanding how important it is for the organization. In Queens, nearly 50,000 cases have been handled, actually by the Legal Aid Society in Queens. And so those are all people that would have nowhere else to go. People that you've helped, folks that needed an advocate and you were there. And so we thank you for that. In Queens, just so you know, we are 130 languages. We're 120 countries. Queens is the most diverse area on the planet. And the most diverse area on the planet. And we're living through some really difficult times with the elimination of federal subsidies being threatened and termination of DACA that was so important to the people of Queens. There's about 28,000 people in Queens eligible for DACA that are now being threatened. And we need people to advocate and to support for the most vulnerable of our borough. And legal aid does that time and time again. Queens is building. There's no doubt. We are building, right? You go to Long Island City, you see all these towers coming up. You go to Jamaica, Queens, people want to live there, be there, spend their money here, invest their money there. We think that's a great thing. But in Queens, we are still a borough of families. We are still the borough where folks are sacrificing and saving all over the world just to bring their families right here to Queens. But we can't do that without the infrastructure of support for those families. And that's what legal aid is known for. It's what you have gained an expertise in. It is the reason that people like the commissioner, people like me, people like Richard spend their time, and folks remain loyal to this organization because of the deep-rooted caring that goes into representation of every single client. So I thank you for being in Queens. I thank you for the work you've done. I love that you had your event here. It's celebrating the Queens, but I got to tell you how many people say, oh, we'll celebrate Queens in Manhattan. So the fact that you chose to celebrate in the People's House here at Borough Hall, I thank you for that and for the leadership that this borough has shown. Keep up the good work. Sometimes when it feels like no one notices, remember that everyone notices that matters. And we thank you for the generations now at 50 years of families that you have helped. So on that note, If I could invite the leadership to join me. Richard, you're going to have to help me with who should come up for this presentation. Oh, and by the way, if you don't live in Queens, because I am the Queens Borough President, right? So if you don't live in Queens and you're here just for this event, before you leave, spend all your money right here in Queens. All right. The borough leaders. And I see that we have here the representative from Governor Andrew Cuomo's office. Hirsch is here. You want to join us, Hirsch, for this? Is there any other representatives from other, like Stacy? Yep. Might as well do it in one shot, right? There you go. Okay. We'll come in front of the podium. When were we at Waugatchel? 25 years ago. 25 years ago. I was 10. I was a child prodigy. Richard was not.
I admit I was 20.
All right. Do we have a printout of this, Sean? Sean, do we have a printout of this? No? Is it in here? Hold on. One of the problems with presenting a proclamation is you can't look at it at the same time. Here we go. This is a proclamation from the Office of the Borough President, and because I love all of you deeply, I will not read the whole thing. Thank you, a smart person over there. Jesse Sly from D.A. Brown's office. Jesse Sly, ladies and gentlemen. The only one that knows to clap for that, because I can't read the whole thing. All right. This is a proclamation of honor to the Legal Aid Society for providing the work that you do. Is a private, not-for-profit legal services organization dedicated since 1876 to providing quality legal representation based on the simple but powerful belief that no New Yorker should be denied access to justice because of poverty. Whereas the Legal Society began serving the residents of Queens in the 1960s by opening a juvenile rights office in '62, expanding its criminal defense representation to Queens in '64, and beginning its civil operations in '66. Whereas during its more than 50 years, the Legal Aid Society has an enduring impact on the lives of thousands of Queens residents. I, therefore, Melinda Katz, President of the Borough of Queens, hereby proclaims Thursday, November 9th, as Legal Aid Society Day in Queens. And it may be Legal Aid Society Day in Queens, but because I know you're a bunch of lawyers, there's still alternate side of the street parking. It's in effect. Don't try it. Congratulations, everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much. Congratulations. Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
You want to do your proclamation? A little out of order. You tell me what you want. No. It's your house, you know.
No problem, no problem. Thanks, Melinda. Thanks very much. We really, really appreciate your support and the support of this community for 50 years. It's terrific. Going a little out of order, I believe that the Governor Cuomo is represented by Hirsch Perek.
Yes.
And he has a proclamation also.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Hirsch Perek, and I'm here on behalf of the governor of this great state, Andrew Cuomo. And before I get to the proclamation, I did want to bring greetings from the governor and thank the Legal Aid Society of Queens for all of the great work you do for all the residents here in this great borough, as our borough president calls it, the world's borough. The governor and Legal Aid have a very strong relationship. We rely on Legal Aid for a lot of our criminal justice initiatives. We look to the folks that come out of Legal Aid, and we're looking to make appointments to the judiciary, as we have right here on this stage from our Court of Appeals, Judge Jenny Rivera, as well as our newest judge, Judge Paul Feynman, who we just appointed earlier this year, who is also the first open LGBT judge on the State Court of Appeals. So we know legal aid is an important institution. The training that it provides to its attorneys, the services you provide to the people of Queens and citywide is unbelievable. And on behalf of the governor, I want to thank all of you for the great work that you do. Like the borough president said, it is a very long citation. I will not read it, but there is just one piece I'd like to read to just summarize what we'd like to do to honor your work. Whereas the Legal Aid Society in Queens is a tireless advocate for adequate resources to protect the rights of the poor with respect for those fundamental rights, offering excellence in defense and other legal services, and for the past 50 years, its caring and compassionate staff has been dedicated to the one simple but powerful belief that no New Yorker should be denied access to justice because of poverty. All New Yorkers join to thank the Legal Aid Society in Queens as it continues to assist people facing life's challenges and legal difficulties by providing wise and capable counsel and a guiding hand. Now, therefore, I, Andrew M. Cuomo, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby confer this special citation in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Legal Aid Society in Queens. Congratulations.
Thank you, Hirsch, and please convey our thanks to Governor Cuomo. I think there's a representative of the mayor's office here also this evening. Nick Galata, is he here? I guess not. Well, let me introduce Stacy Eliot, the representative of the public advocate, Letitia James, who also has a proclamation for us. We're getting a lot of proclamations.
50 years is a big deal. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Stacy Eliot. I am the Queens representative for New York City Public Advocate Letitia James. I'm very honored to be here tonight. In fact, when we discussed with the public advocate this event, she said, "Oh, we have to be here. We have to be here," because she actually is an alumna, rather, of the Legal Aid Society. And I think that's where she brings a lot of her inspiration from. She is a public advocate of the people. In her 4 years in this role, we have enacted more legislation, more litigation than any of the other public advocates combined. And we do it because of the people that we serve. 50,000 people every single year in Queens. That's out of the 2.3 million people, that's 1 out of 46 individuals. I grew up here in Queens. The people that you serve are most likely, at least one of them is going to be someone that I've met in my lifetime. These are our neighbors, the people that we grew up with, the people that we went to high school with. And it's so important to see those individuals as worthy of being protected. And you, in many respects, are not just the first line of defense, you're also the last line of defense. And so for that, I want to offer my deep gratitude on behalf of both myself, but also on behalf of the public advocate. We appreciate the work that you do, and we look forward to supporting you in whatever way that we can moving forward. So thank you so much, and I would like to present this proclamation on behalf of our office.
Come. Thank you. Another picture. Okay, thank you. Oh, here's the other one. Oh, by the way, I'm Finn Fogg, president of the Legal Aid Society. I think this is a lifetime appointment for me, but we shall see. Before proceeding, let me just introduce a couple of other people from Legal Aid who are important to the society, my colleagues. Adrian Holder, standing in the back, who's the attorney in charge of the citywide civil practice of the Legal Aid Society. Tina Longo down front, who's the attorney in charge of the citywide criminal practice. Lou Sartori, who's the director of our pro bono program. Lou gets out over 3,000 volunteers every year to help us handle the caseload, without whom we just couldn't serve as many people. And let me just also mention Ida Ramos, who I think, Ida does everything, and I think she spent over a decade here in the Queen's office, Ida. Great to have you here. A little later, you'll be hearing from Seymour James, who is our leader, our attorney in charge, attorney in chief, and my friend, my dear friend. Seymour has announced that he's going to retire next June when he turns 70. You know, I don't know, 70's not so old, Seymour. Anyway, Seymour has been a great fighter for equal justice, spending 43 years at Legal Aid. His entire career. The society has come a long way under his leadership. He's enhanced our diversity efforts by providing training for all staff, encouraged greater diversification. He prodded us to do a strategic plan, which we did a couple of years ago, and is a great blueprint for the future. He's encouraged us to strengthen our relationships with the communities and the social justice organizations. Just been a terrific, terrific leader. And now let me introduce the Honorable Jenny Rivera. Judge Rivera was named in 2013 by Governor Cuomo to the Court of Appeals. She spent her entire career in public service. She clerked for the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor in the Southern District. She also clerked in the Second Circuit in the Pro Se office. She worked in the Homeless Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society and for the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. She was appointed by the New York State Attorney General as Special Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights. She's been an administrative law judge for the New York State Division for Human Rights and served on the New York City Commission on Human Rights. She was a tenured faculty member at CUNY Law School, where she founded and served as director of the law school's Center on Latino and Latino Rights and Equality. Judge Rivera.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm really so pleased to be here. When I got the invitation, I quickly looked on the calendar and said, yes, I can go. And I am really thrilled to be here. So many friends, many former students in the audience, which is wonderful. And as already has been mentioned, I am an alum of the Legal Aid Society. It was my first job after I clerked, and it was an incredible training ground. And I learned several rules that carried me through my practice and as a law professor. One, be tenacious, which all members of the Legal Aid Society are, which is another way of saying don't take no for an answer. Be prepared, which is again a way of ensuring that you never disappoint your client or yourself. Never compromise on your ethical standards or your values in any case, in front of any judge, or before any opposing counsel. And I've always carried that truism throughout my professional career. And I very much appreciated the work of my colleagues. You know, Legal Aid is a very special place. I don't need to say that to those of you who have worked at Legal Aid or are working at Legal Aid. But it really is a special place in the sense that you feel like you're with a family. You have a particular mission of the organization that carries you through moments which are perhaps little bit more tougher than other moments. Times when you think you're not going to win a case, times when even when you win a case, you feel like, well, we could have done more, we wish we had done more. And of course, your colleagues who are there when you have the big wins and you really make a difference. So on a personal level, legal aid has always had a special place in my heart because it was my training ground. And I loved the work that I did at the Homeless Family Rights Project. Very intellectually challenging as well as professionally satisfying. But what I really loved about legal aid, apart from my own personal experience, apart from the self, was indeed the work that legal aid has always done. I grew up on the Lower East Side, community which is not the she Lower East Side of today. A very challenging place to grow up with much love in my own home, but nevertheless a very difficult place to grow up. And I don't romanticize it. I grew up poor. I don't try to suggest anything else about that experience. But in the same way that you've already heard how many lives you touch in Queens, legal aid, of course, has a very great presence. And so as a member of the Latino community in that neighborhood, I always knew how important free legal services were for the survival of our communities and our families, and the importance of legal aid. The reality is that you have saved lives, you have saved families, and you really are a pillar of our democratic system. Our country exists on rules of law, and every time you're in court, you remind us the importance of those rules of law, but you also remind us about the humanity that those rules are supposed to represent. So I thank you for that, not only, again, for my own personal training, but for the significant work that you do on behalf of so many New Yorkers who, of course, cannot be here today, but who you see in your offices all the time, and their families, their extended families, their friends, of course, who depend on all the work that you do. But I'm also very close to legal aid because even when I was in law school, I was forming a deep and long-term friendship with one of your stars, Carolyn Silvers, who was my former roommate. As she is sworn to secrecy, will tell no stories out of school. But I know so many of you have worked with her and for her, and she is merely a representative of all that is good in the community and the family of legal aid. That commitment through, we were just saying, almost 30 years, right? Almost 3 decades. That staying power, doing what she feels is right, what she is deeply committed to, and always what makes legal aid stand out and why it's so important. And then Adrienne Holder, where'd you go, Adrienne? There she goes. So I didn't get to meet Adrienne until I met her on the non-lawyers committee that the former Chief Judge Lippman, had appointed us both to. But I was so impressed with her. She's brilliant, so deeply committed, and I'm so happy that you work for legal aid because it really is so important, again, to have people so deeply committed and so well versed in the law. And really, and I say this with much love and respect, a real pit bull for justice. That's what we need. So I thank you for that. So I won't take much more of your time, but I was really struck when I got the invitation letter that it's been 15 years that you're celebrating for the work in Queens. I too am a former Queensite. Queensite, is it called a Queensite? Queens resident. I like Queensite, it kind of sounds romantic, I don't know. Anyway. Not far away, actually. I used to live in Forest Hills. And of course, I spent almost 2 decades teaching in Queens because I taught at CUNY Law School for almost 2 decades, half my career. And so Queens is also very near and dear to me. It is true, it's such a diverse and vibrant borough. But of course, a borough like the rest of our city and so other parts of the state that nevertheless the moments when we see the best parts of Queens, we also know that there are real problems in the community, right? Tenant displacement, injustice on the streets, concerns about relations with the police. So those are all issues that I know Legal Aid has been deeply committed to and worked very hard on. So I was very surprised that it's been 50 years. I really felt that it was even longer, but it's nice to see that this is your first 50. And I'm happy to be here with you and as we say in Spanish, pa'lante y presente. Thank you.
So good evening. I'm Seymour James, the current Attorney-in-Chief. I have the pleasure of introducing two of the administrative judges for Queens County. The first is the Honorable Joseph A. Zayas. So I have to call him Judge up here. But you know, Judge Zayas actually was a legal aid employee. He's also an alumnus. He worked not only in our Appeals Bureau, but he actually worked in the Queens Criminal Defense Office before returning to the Appeals Bureau, and then working for Justice Acosta in the Appellate Division. He is the administrative judge for criminal term here in Queens County, known as a scholar, a prolific writer. He's written many decisions, and I also have the pleasure of serving with him on the Sentencing Commission, where he provides great insight into the issues that we need to address. And the other thing he did while at Legal Aid is he was with our Capital Defense Unit, which fortunately we have no more, but there was capital punishment in New York for about 10 years until a decision upended it, and it was not, the legislature did not find a way to reinstate it, thankfully. And actually, a lot of the fact that it was no longer, that it was found unconstitutional had a lot to do with the statute as it was written, which I have to say that Legal Aid had a lot to do with. I don't know, were you in the unit at the time when that was? When, Tim, yeah.
The case that we argued was the result of the nail in the court.
Right, so thank you for that. Okay. So let me turn it over to Judge Zayas.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor for me to be asked to speak at this wonderful celebration, and thank you so much for having me. Great to see my colleagues. I see my friend Judge Margulis and Judge Iannici, Judge Armstrong here from the criminal court bench. Always great to see them. Aren't we so lucky to get to hear from our great Court of Appeals Judge Jenny Rivera today, though. Really appreciate that. Seymour mentioned that I was in the Appeals Bureau, but I have to say I never argued a case before a judge like that, and I wish I had in my many years. Some of you know, and I know some of you, so many of you in the room, but as many of you know, I began my legal career, and I went to Columbia Law School, but I think only 3 of us went to the public sector out of that graduating class, and I was one of them, and there was no question in my mind I was going to the Legal Aid Society. So I started with the Criminal Appeals Bureau of Legal Aid, then the Criminal Defense Division of Legal Aid in Queens County, where I worked under my friend Seymour James. And you folks saw this photo of Seymour in the, I mean, you almost look just as young as you did then. That's a great photo of you. And then I finished off my litigation days working with my good friend Tim Roundtree and Gary Alexion, who also works for Legal Aid. But Tim Roundtree, and we worked in the Capital Defense Unit, and we worked on the state's first death penalty case that went to trial. Now, Tim hung on and stood and did the trial. I did a lot of the pretrial work and then took a job with Judge Acosta, who's now the PJ of the First Department. But I don't think people realize the caliber, the excellence of the lawyers that work for Legal Aid. But Tim Roundtree and others hold the distinction of having tried the first death penalty case in New York State. And it basically went up to the Court of Appeals and as I said, ended the death penalty as we know it in New York. That's the reenactment. Yeah. But I'm happy to see many of the lawyers that I work with. I see Ms. Seta there, Ms. Gomez, Ruth Johnson, and my good friend Edwin Novillo. And I'm so happy that, because I've really worked both in the Appeals Bureau, the Capital Defense Unit, and the Criminal Defense Division with so many excellent lawyers. And I personally feel so blessed that I began my legal career with the Legal Aid Society, right? Judge Rivera mentioned the training was excellent. The opportunities to litigate important issues were abundant. The work was so satisfying. And as I said, the attorneys with whom I worked were not only superb lawyers, but they were great people with great hearts for the poor. And I was the lucky beneficiary of all of that for a good 9 years. So now when I go and speak to new lawyers about careers in the law, I always attribute my success to the extent that I was successful, not only as a lawyer, but as a judge, and to the great career, the great training that I had with the Legal Aid Society. Yeah, where else can an attorney have an opportunity to brief or argue a case in the Court of Appeals or conduct a full jury trial within the first year that that attorney is admitted? Can you imagine that? I was a brand new lawyer, and I was sent to argue a case within a year of getting admitted to the Court of Appeals. But who else gets that opportunity? And it was just a wonderful experience. But obviously, the Legal Aid Society doesn't just train lawyers to be great advocates, right? After all, it's not about the lawyer, it's about the client. It's about the Legal Aid Society's grand mission to provide access to justice for the poor. And it's about the Legal Aid Society's vision for a better future. And I've heard this quoted, so it must be in your literature, that no New Yorker should be denied access to justice because of poverty. As U.S. Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell stated, equal justice under law is one of the ends for which our entire legal system exists. And it is fundamental that justice should be the same in substance and in availability without regard to economic status. It is awe-inspiring to see how the Legal Aid Society of Queens County has worked so diligently to fulfill this mission of equal justice under law. You have done precisely what the old proverb admonishes us to do. Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And it's so heartening to know that the Legal Aid Society has given a voice to the voiceless and has championed the needs of the indigent for the last 50 years. Now, I know that the Legal Aid Society does work in the civil courts and in the family courts and does so many different types of practices aside from the criminal court. But I want you to know that as the administrative judge of the Supreme Court's criminal term, I am especially grateful for the hard work that you all do in our criminal courts. When the criminal justice system or the court gets a case wrong, and it happens sometimes, the resulting miscarriage of justice is devastating not only to the wrongly convicted, but it is devastating to the ideals of justice generally. And that is why I have never been shy about saying that your vigilant advocacy increases our chances, the court's chances, of getting it right. Our adversarial system of justice depends upon you to be a zealous advocate. We depend on you to provide mitigation, to uncover exculpatory evidence, to subject proffered testimony to the crucible of cross-examination. We depend upon your incessant objections, Ms. Gomez. And I say that with all affection, Ms. Gomez. I'll be waiting for you. And it depends generally on you making the case for humanity, which I noticed is what you boast as your slogan with the Legal Aid Society. As the Supreme Court held in Gideon, defense attorneys in criminal courts are necessities, not luxuries. They represent the assurance that the noble ideals of procedural and substantive due process can be achieved. Your advocacy on behalf of the indigent not only makes the legal fight fairer, but it produces confidence in the outcome, confidence that justice was done. So thank you again for letting me say a few words, and congratulations.
I now have the pleasure of introducing Judge Michelle Johnson. Judge Johnson had a distinguished career in the Brooklyn DA's office, rising to be an executive assistant district attorney for the School Crimes Bureau. Prior to that, she had been in the Homicide Bureau as well as the Felony Trial Bureau. She then left for a little brief period of time to engage in private practice with her own law firm and then with a partner, Armstrong and Wiley, and was appointed as an interim civil court judge in 2011, reappointed in 2012, and then appointed to a full 10-year term as a criminal court judge in 2013. In last year, she was appointed by Judge Marks to be the supervising judge of the criminal court of the City of New York in Queens County. Judge Johnson?
I could yell, but good evening, everyone. So yes, I am Judge Johnson. So everyone's saying, who's that, right? That's still me. Judge Armstrong is Judge Johnson. And I'm just honored. I maybe don't need this. I'm really honored to be here today. When Mr. James indicated that she was at the DA's office, I saw everyone like look down. So what I will tell you is that's also a great training ground. But after I left the DA's office, I was in private practice doing defense work for about 7 years right here in Queens County. And we'll get to how that's almost two sides of the same coin, almost. But I will tell you that I'm honored to stand here in celebration of your 50 years here in Queens. I thought to myself, 50 years, you've been here in Queens longer than I've been alive. Oh, so you all didn't think that was funny. Okay. So maybe not so, but you've been here a long time. What I will say is that I've stood beside many of you for many years doing the important work that you do as a defense attorney here in the 18B panel. In fact, a number of you right in this room served with me as co-counsels for different clients that we represented right here in Queens. And I was proud to stand beside you then. I can tell you I'm even prouder now as a judge to see what you do from the perspective of the bench. Because I know firsthand what you do daily. You meet people, the best of people in the worst of times, and you meet the worst of people in the worst of times. And what I know from experience and from watching all of you is that no matter how you meet your clients, you treat them with grace and dignity and respect. You treat them as human beings, and that is commendable. I know firsthand, but even more so for you, that your job is often thankless. Your clients, because your services are free, don't always appreciate you. And I've seen you be unappreciated in front of me on occasion, but you handle that with grace. And even those that don't know how thankful they should be, everyone that sees what you do for them knows how thankful they should be. So rest with that when you sleep at night. Although your services are free, and rightfully so for the citizens of Queens who can't afford representation in the criminal justice system, your services are wonderful. They are great. The expertise that you show every day is phenomenal and valuable. And so again, rest with that when you sleep at night. Make no mistake that our system of justice depends on and relies on and expects you to put on that superhero coat every day, walk into court, and defend your clients aggressively. And I often see it, and I'm not disappointed. You all definitely raise up to the task. As Judge Zayas indicated, our system of jurisprudence is dependent upon equal access to justice. And it's almost like the three branches of government. It's the judicial, the executive, the legislative. I see you all kind of like that. Whereas in the courtroom, I've now been on three sides. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a defense attorney, I've been a judge. And those three are necessary. We all three are the gatekeepers of due process for every citizen charged with a crime in this state, in this county. And you all have a role to play, and if you do your job well, it makes it, as Judge Zayas indicated, it makes it easier for the bench to get it right. I just told you said what I was gonna say, so if I repeat myself, it's because we didn't talk about it first. I could have taken that line out. So I wanna say thank you from the bench, and from all of the citizens of Queens County who don't understand how much they should thank you every day for everything you do. Okay.
So I want to thank Judge Rivera, Judge Zayas, and Judge Johnson for those very warm and kind remarks about the work of the Legal Aid Society and our lawyers. I actually echo those, but I'm a little biased. Before I give you my remarks, I want to read a letter from Judge April Newbauer, who's a Court of Claims judge sitting in the Bronx, who served as the attorney in charge of the civil office here for some, well, she's got it here for, I guess, about 15 years. So to my friends and former colleagues, I'm very sorry not to be with you in person for the 50th anniversary of the Legal Aid Society in Queens. Having served as the attorney in charge of the civil practice for a third of that time, she's got not quite. Okay. But, you know, we're lawyers, so our math is usually not that good. I deeply regret that a family commitment keeps me from celebrating our work together this evening. While head of the office from November 10th, 1997 to June 20th, 2012, in case you think I've forgotten, we doubled our staff, expanded our practice areas to family law, foreclosure prevention, and consumer debt, and spearheaded multiple outreach and community service models. As you well know, working as legal aid attorneys in the Queens courts was never easy and remains a major challenge today. The responses of the bench and bar are not always as respectful, gratifying, and supportive as we deserve. Fortunately, the persevering spirit of our clients, their children, and extended families, when facing multiple barriers, provide a role model to keep our own challenges in perspective and to redouble our efforts on their behalf. Indeed, they merit no less. So on this occasion, I commend you for the work you have done, are doing, and will do in the future to achieve social justice. As a great lawyer once said, the work always seems impossible until it's done. And that's a quote from Nelson Mandela. With respect and love, April Newbauer. So for me, it's always great to return to Queens. Like Rich, I grew up in Queens. I wasn't born here, but I grew up in Queens. I spent all my formative years in Springfield Gardens and Hollis, communities where many of our clients now come from. I want to thank Pat Bath, our Director of Communications, for organizing this event, and of course, Borough President Katz for offering this space and co-sponsoring this event and hosting us. It's really fitting that we celebrate the Legal Aid Society's history in Queens in an atrium named for the late Helen Marshall. As an assemblywoman, city council member, and borough president, Helen Marshall was one of the staunchest supporters of our organization and the clients we serve. I was so saddened to learn that when she died earlier this year. So I'm supposed to tell you a little bit about what it was like in Queens when I was here, so I'm going to do that now. Okay? So I first joined Queens as the deputy attorney in charge under Robert Baum in 1985. I then returned to the Brooklyn office in 1987 for a year and was appointed as the attorney-in-chief here in 1998. In '85, when I first joined Queens, it was a comparatively small office, about 60 lawyers, far fewer than the Bronx or Brooklyn, where I previously worked, but it had no shortage of the complex cases or issues facing the other boroughs. I was immediately impressed with the camaraderie and the high quality of advocacy that was reflected amongst the staff. Throughout my time in Queens, I was truly honored to work with bright, dedicated colleagues committed to providing our clients with exemplary representation. Now, thinking back to when I first got here, within my first few weeks in the office, we called attention to a pattern of police abuse in the 106th Precinct. One of our clients informed his lawyer he was coerced into giving a false confession by electric jolts with a stun gun. He actually had scars on his body from that stun gun. And we had him examined by a medical expert, which confirmed that the scars were the result of electric burns. Police officers were torturing people that they arrested in order to get confessions out of them. Fortunately, in this particular case, it was one of the rare arrests and convictions of police officers for physical abuse. A few months later, one of our senior attorneys, a phenomenal attorney, tried a murder case where an expert was permitted to testify for the defense about the psychological effects and consequences of being a battered and abused woman. Another highly noteworthy press case. This was one of the first cases in the nation to permit such expert testimony and utilize the battered wife defense. The sterling advocacy by our attorney secured an acquittal for our client. The next decade saw an enormous increase in drug cases as a scourge of crack cocaine infested the borough. The police responded with tactical narcotics teams, narcotics units that flooded the courts with arrests. In 1987, the huge volume of cases forced the Legal Aid Society to inform the city that we could no longer staff the arraignment parts because the caseload was just too high, and the courts began utilizing 18B attorneys. Throughout the city, caseloads were skyrocketing. Recognizing that the staff caseload conditions were untenable, the city finally agreed to increase our funding. That September 1987, we hired 150 lawyers and law graduates across the city, and 40 of them were assigned to Queens. The following September, another large class of attorneys joined the office. So Queens was now almost double its original size. Of course, these narcotics units often took shortcuts and made precipitous arrests. In a number of cases, our staff investigators were able to determine that the officers were incapable of observing what they claimed to have seen from their observation points, and the lawyers secured acquittals after demonstrating that the officers were lying. But large numbers of black and brown people were being continually imprisoned for narcotics offenses. In the mid-90s, it became apparent that the mass arrest of addicts for drug offenses was neither reducing crime nor preventing addicts from returning to the abuse of drugs upon their release. After about a year of planning by the court, the district attorney's office, the Legal Aid Society, and a treatment provider, we established the Queens Treatment Court. The treatment modality proved to be highly successful and demonstrated that treatment was far more effective than incarceration in reducing drug crimes. Because of the success of the treatment courts, and they were instituted throughout the city, the harsh Rockefeller drug laws were later modified in 2004 and 2009, reducing the sentences for drug offenses. When I came to Queens, social workers are already integrated into the practice, assisting with program placements and preparing pre-pleading and pre-sentencing memoranda to mitigate sentences for clients who were convicted. During my years as the AIC in Queens, we use that short name for the attorney in charge, for those of you who are not in our offices. In an effort to expand the holistic approach to our practice, we assigned dedicated social workers to 3 new programs. We established a MICA program to address the needs of clients who were severely mentally ill and were substance abusers. These social workers worked with the client not only during the pendency of the case, but after the case disposition to make sure they were participating in necessary therapies. We had an adolescent intervention project, a team of an attorney, a social worker, and an investigator that represented juvenile offenders, children aged 13 to 15 charged as adults. Those programs were also in existence in the other counties. One unique program to Queens was the Point of Entry Project. With Kennedy Airport serving as a point of entry for the importation of drugs, we established this program to handle the airport cases. There were a significant number of passengers, mostly women, who were being used as mules, often because of threats to their families. And they were coming in charged with offenses that carried a life term. Our interdisciplinary team of an attorney, social worker, and investigator delved deeply into the cases to determine the underlying facts. The social worker and the attorney would meet with the district attorney's office and were often successful in convincing the DA to significantly reduce the charges. And the social worker actually was in the office making the advocacy pitch. In recent years, we've expanded the use of social workers, placing them in many of our arraignment shifts to help attorneys identify mental health problems and seek release pending trial rather than detention. Unfortunately, while I was in Queens, the Giuliani and Bloomberg years brought broken windows policing, unlawful stop and frisks, which inundated the court with low-level misdemeanors and violations. Our lawyers were tenacious in fighting those cases, and they also were so dedicated that despite the fact that they had heavy caseloads and were working, in some instances, on arraignment every week, knowing that clients could be released, these staff members worked well past 1 a.m. in the morning, often until 2 or 3 a.m., to ensure that the clients who would get to court and once arraigned would be released could have that opportunity rather than stay in for an additional day. Under Mayor Giuliani, significant budget cuts severely reduced our staffing. But with case caps funding from OCA, we have rebounded and now have a total staff of nearly 190 in the Criminal Defense Office. Throughout the years in Queens, in addition to implementing new programs, the office continued to litigate hearings and trials, and it developed one of the busiest motion practices in the city. We often see decisions from the judges because of the motions that the criminal defense staff in Queens writes. I focused on the Criminal Defense Office because that was my office when I was in Queens, but I want to tell you a little bit about some of the terrific work of our juvenile rights and civil practice offices. Each of our offices dedicated to achieving social justice for our clients. Our Juvenile Rights Practice Office has been handling child protective, juvenile delinquency, and persons in need of supervision matters since 1962. Under the leadership of Kim McLaren, Dodd Terry, and now Carolyn Silvers, JRP has set the standard for child advocacy, and there are no finer child advocates. They also utilize a holistic model which incorporates social workers to help address our clients' needs. One of the many innovative initiatives JRP developed is the Educational Advocacy Project. Recognizing that a high proportion of JRP's clients struggled with unaddressed learning disabilities, developmental delays, and educational deficits, JRP decided to devote staff in the boroughs to provide direct legal advocacy in education matters. This project works to obtain appropriate intervention from the Board of Education to ensure that our family court clients receive necessary special education services. Our civil practice started with the Far Rockaway neighborhood office with a staff of about 5 individuals. Queens neighborhood office was added in the early 90s, and after budget cuts in 2004, the staff from the Rockaway office joined the Kew Garden staff. After the Far Rockaway office closed, our commitment to the community in Rockaway never wavered because we were aware of the difficulty of commuting from the Rockaways. Any of you ever traveled to the Rockaways from Kew Gardens? It's quite a trek. Okay. But we were aware of that, so our paralegals and attorneys staffed weekly intake at Peninsula General Hospital. And after the hospital closed, Adrian Holt had the great idea, so why don't we get a mobile justice van? So we purchased a mobile van called the Mobile Justice Unit, and that has enabled us to travel out to Rockaways to meet the needs of our clients in that community. Let me talk a little bit about a couple of Queens-specific projects. The Queens Foreclosure Prevention Project was established to assist senior citizens and regularly save the homes of senior citizens who had been the victims of unconscionable loan transactions by negotiating reduced payments to keep them in their homes. After the financial crisis in 2008, Queens became the epicenter of the foreclosure cases in New York City as the number of foreclosure actions dramatically increased. With increased funding, we expanded our foreclosure practice beyond seniors and worked with other providers in the court to set up and staff settlement parts where homes were saved for innumerable clients. In 2012, after Superstorm Sandy, and everybody remembers what a devastating storm that was, civil staff regularly went to Far Rockaway and the Mobile Justice Unit to help the members of that devastated community complete FEMA forms and applications for emergency benefits. So I've given you just a brief description of some of the work we've done over the last 50 years, during which we've been an integral part of the Queens community. Currently, our funding is relatively stable, and our practices are committed to addressing the multiple needs of our clients in a holistic manner. It's been a little over 50 years, but we look forward to continuing over the next 50 and 150 to balance the scales of justice for those who are unable to afford counsel. I want to thank the local attorneys in charge, Tim Roundtree, Carolyn Silvers, and Satish Nore, for the excellent work that they do, and of course our practice leaders. Dawn Mitchell, who is about to assume responsibility for the juvenile rights practice, has joined us. Dawn. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I have to tell you that it was a great ride in Queens. It's been a great ride for me for 43 years. I can't think of anything that I would have enjoyed more. The number of friends and colleagues that I've met here at the Legal Aid Society has just been phenomenal. I'll always remember all of you, and I love working with you, and I'll always cherish the many times I've been with you during these 43 years. So I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you very much for coming to this celebration. It's been a wonderful evening, and I think there probably is some more food, so if you want to get some more to eat, you can do that as well. Okay?